this is the last section that we'll be talking specifically about quadratics, and again, we're solving. I want to just do a short recap of the different ways that we know how to solve, ways to find zeros or x-intercepts. You could also call them roots or solutions. All of those words are synonyms for each other. But we've got a few different methods. We learned the square root method. Remember, you use the square root method when you've only got an x squared and numbers. So if you've got an x to the first power, you don't typically use square root method. Okay, we looked at factoring. This is a very common method, and it is what I always try first. We did completing the square, which most people don't like that much. You want to make sure you know how to do it for later. But we will learn a better method today, or a more efficient method, maybe a better word. And it's called the quadratic formula. Now, with the quadratic formula, this formula will save you the hassle of having to complete the square. Now, I think y'all have seen it before, but I do want to make sure that you have it written down. So if you're talking about a quadratic formula that's written in this form, so you need to have it in order and you need to have it set equal to 0, then here's the quadratic formula, and then I'm going to give you a song to help you remember it. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That formula, and we're going to practice some, will find your zeros or your x-intercepts or your roots, however you want to phrase that. Now there's actually two little songs to help you remember it, so I just picked the one that I like. So I'm going to play this little video right here that has the song in it. I thought these people were kind of funny too, their little chipmunk voices.
The quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now you try. The quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
Alright, so remembering that little song really will get that in your head, and the more you have it in your head, the better. Like factoring, it ain't going anywhere. So you might as well embrace quadratic formula and its little song. Okay, so let's look at a few of these. So here's our first one. Now in this problem, my a is 1. So my a is the number in front here. My b is negative 4. And my c is 3. Now I'm not normally going to write these out. I just want to make sure that you have in your head what each of the a, b, and c are. And let me write my quadratic formula. So I'm going to plug it into my formula. So I have a negative 4, so positive 4, plus or minus the square root of negative 4 squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And then I'm basically going to simplify this down. I would start inside the square root if it were me. So I have 16 minus 12, which is 4. And square root of 4 is 2. Okay, now here's what this means. If this is a perfect square, it means you probably could have factored in the beginning. Now it's okay if you didn't, because quadratic formula really is a fallback method. It works every time. So I'm just going to split this apart. Here's my plus, here's my minus, and get my answer. So 6 over 2 is 3, and 2 over 2 is 1. So here are my two answers. Now let's go back up to the top. Let's go back up to the problem here. Remember I said if this turns out to be a whole number that's a perfect square, it means you probably could have factored in the beginning. I'm going to factor this thing. So let's see, minus 3 minus 1. Set those equal to 0 and solve. I'm going to do that here. So x minus 3 equals 0, x minus 1 equals 0. So 3 and 1. Look at that. Same answers, whether you do quadratic formula or you do factoring. Shouldn't it be really that surprising seeing as how it's the same problem? So either way works. Factoring's a lot more efficient, so I would always look for that first. Now let's do a few more of these. We're probably going to do maybe 2 or 3 where they're not quite so nice. Okay, so we're looking at this one first. So first of all, we need to get everything on one side of the equal sign. It needs to be set equal to 0, and we want to get everything in the right order. So I'm going to add my 2x to the other side, and then I still have this 2 here. And then I'll plug into my formula. So negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, and basically keep on simplifying down. Now here's how I usually simplify. I did a little bit more step by step a second ago. I usually just write out what I have right there. So I end up with 4 minus 8, which is a negative 4. Ooh, a negative inside of a fraction. What kind of answer are we going to get? I hope you just thought to yourself imaginary. And then I'm going to reduce with that 2 both places here. It belongs to both of those. So I end up with negative 1 plus or minus I. Now here are my two answers. Negative 1 plus I and negative 1 minus I. Let's do this one. Okay, now same as before, I want to get everything on one side of the equal sign, and I will just tell you it's kind of a pain if your x squared is negative, so I would move it so that that doesn't happen. So I'm going to move my 2x squared over to the other side. Now I want you all to notice something before we get started here. See how 2 goes into each of these numbers here? It's probably a good idea to go through and divide by 2. And if I want to divide by 2, I can, as long as I balance over here. Now the nice part about it is it gives me a lot of benefits over here. My numbers are a lot smaller. Doesn't affect me over there because 0 divided by anything is still 0. Then let's plug into our formula. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Alright, so simplifying down here, I have a negative 24, which means 16 minus 24 is a negative 8, 16 minus 24. Alright, so I've got a little bit of simplifying I need to do here. So 8 is 4 times 2. I can take the square root of the 4 and get 2 root 2. Take care of the negative with an I. Now remember, this 2 right here belongs to both of those terms. So I have negative 2 plus or minus, the 2's cancel, I root 2. So here are my two answers. Negative 2 plus I root 2 and negative 2 minus I root 2. Okay, now the last thing we're going to talk about in this section is called the discriminant. Now, I go back and forth a little bit every year on whether I think that this is actually necessary or not. But SAT people, sometimes I've seen question about it on the SAT. Now, here's what the discriminant is. It's the b squared minus 4ac part of the quadratic formula, which I'm going to write out right here real quick. Okay, now I want you to notice it's the part of the equation, the b squared minus 4ac, it's the part that's inside the square root. What it does is the type of number your discriminant is determines if your answers are going to be real or if they're going to be imaginary. Now I want you to think about this for a second. If your discriminant is positive, which means it's greater than 0, are your answers going to be real or imaginary? If this number is positive, your answers are going to be real, and you're going to have 2 of them. So you're going to have 2 real answers. Now you have to actually do the quadratic formula to know what they are, but you know you're going to have 2 and they're going to be real. Now what about if it's negative, if it's less than 0? Now that's when we get into, like this one, the 8, negative 8 here is the discriminant. See how we ended up with an imaginary number? So if your discriminant is negative or less than 0, you're going to have 2 imaginary answers. So the last situation would be if it actually equaled 0. Now think about it for a second. If that whole thing was 0, that's what we're adding and subtracting, so we'd only have 1 answer. We wouldn't have 2. And it would be a real number because I wouldn't have any negatives inside the square root because it would be a 0 there. Okay, now what we're going to do here is just find the discriminant and then tell how many answers our problem's going to have. Okay, so my discriminant, b squared minus 4ac, is going to be 36, that's the b squared, minus 4ac. So 36 minus 32 is 4. Okay, my discriminant's positive, so I have 2 real answers. Now I don't know what they are, but I'm going to have 2 of them. Okay, same thing here, negative b minus 4ac. So I have negative 6. Okay, I pretty much screwed that up. Let me start that over again. It'd be a good idea if I actually used the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac. So b squared is 6 squared is 36 minus 4ac. So 36 minus 36 is 0. My discriminant's 0. I have 1 real solution. I bet you can guess what's going to happen in the next one. So b squared minus 4ac. So I have 36 minus 40 is a negative 4. If it's negative, I'm going to have 2 imaginary answers, or they call them solutions here. Now, like I said, I don't know if honestly the discriminant's the most important thing in the world. However, I have seen it on the SAT, so I did want to make sure y'all knew what it was. Alright, so quadratic formula, like factoring, be good at it because it's not going anywhere.